Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now here in my hands, the Canik METE SFT. Now this is a firearm I purchased specifically for its flexibility and versatility and the ability for me to leverage this to test other pieces of gear here on the channel. And that's exactly what we're gonna do today. So the Canik METE SFT coming with some very nice sights, but I was looking around, I found the XS Sights website and said, this would be a fantastic opportunity to upgrade the Canik METE SFT. So here in my hands, these are the DXT2 night sights from XS Sights. A great offering, very cool, and taking my sights from the Canik METE SFT from simple white dot sights to these tritium and glowing, nice, bright, large sights. So what we're gonna do today, we're gonna swap out the sights on my Canik METE SFT to these DXT2 night sights. Then we're gonna get to the range, do some practical testing. I have a number of things to think about, but with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now, before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at XS Sights who did provide these for review. And so again, as we get into this, the Canik METE SFT, which for me has just been an awesome offering. It's been just solid, rock solid, no problem. And it has given me the ability to test things like, for example, weapon lights on the pick rail and optics on my cut slide. And in today's case, well, we're going to talk about dovetailed sights. So as we take a look at the factory sights, very nice, just simple white dot sights, both on the rear and on the front. The front is a pretty nice large white sight, a little bit smaller on the rear, and the sight picture generally very good. You'll notice right away the ability for me to actually co-witness through this red dot, and in this case it's a green dot. So pretty cool. I mean, all in all, this has been fantastic. However, no technically like night sight capability, which might not matter with the optic, but it is nice to have it. And on top of that, just the learning experience that you get from working through some of these things. And so to now set this up with the DXT2 night sights from XS Sights, I think this is going to be pretty cool. And so as we get into this, please keep in mind a couple of things. First off, there are different sights you can get from XS Sights, so tons of different types of sights. Then on top of that, for tons of different models of handgun, and then even at that, with this particular set, I did have the ability to go with either green, yellow, or orange, and each has their advantages and I guess what I would say disadvantages. So you really do need to think about what you're trying to do, what your objectives are, and what that means for you. And the first thing you will notice, I did go with yellow. Now, yellow is going to be absolutely the brightest sights, but at the same time, you may run into some contrast issues at various times. The orange is going to be great contrast in bright conditions. The green going to be great contrast as you get into lower light. And so just depending on what you're trying to do, you have a few different options. The rear, you'll notice, is a straight single line there. Now, that's going to align with my front sight pretty much as the circle dot gets centered right on top of the line. These also having tritium, so they're going to glow at night. Just very cool, and that should be an upgrade over my factory sights. So the questions that I'm going to have, will I still be able to leverage the red dot? Now, unfortunately, I believe for this particular sort of scenario, I'm going to drop the green dot off of this. Then we'll go to the range. I'm going to do a test of the actual sights themselves without the green dot. Then we'll come back, I'll mount the green dot, and we'll see if I have the ability to co-witness. Now, in terms of the actual sight removal and installation, there are a few different ways you can go about doing it. If you take a look at the XS website, they do have instructions on their YouTube channel to help you with that. In my particular case, I am going to leverage a sight puller. I have covered this particular unit in prior videos, but you can see at this point, I have everything pretty much established and ready to go. So I'm going to leverage my sight puller now at this point to remove the front sight. Pretty straightforward. And so as I set out to use the sight puller, unfortunately, well, here I am, well over a week later, I had to get myself some punches. So you can see, trying a few different things to get the sights off. Now, I did try to start with basically a nylon punch, something that was going to be fairly simple, something that was going to be non-abrasive, non-marring, and allow me to get my front sights off. But the front sights were in so hard. You can see I'm just absolutely pounding this nylon punch. So at this point, I did have to change to a brass dovetailed punch. Now, unfortunately, this was a little bit large. I got these from Brownells. I thought this punch would fit perfectly, but unfortunately, it was a little bit large. So I started by filing down the bottom edge to try to get this to fit a little bit better. Now you'll see I went through a little bit of an iteration, leveraging a file, trying to keep this as flat as possible. I did end up pretty much going with a belt sander by the end of this, but I wanted to get just a little bit of momentum, a little bit of an understanding, and see how difficult it was going to be to take some metal off. And I went with the file for a while. It got kind of close to fitting, but it wasn't quite enough. So you'll see, testing this time and time and time again, it was not quite small enough to fit within my dovetail. So again, I did eventually go with a belt sander. Now, in order to maintain this in as least a damaging and as least of an abrasive method, I did knock all the corners down and rounded everything out, and I was able to finally punch out the front sights. The rear sights were actually very easy to remove, all things considered. They did have a set screw, and then I leveraged the punch simply to hammer out the backside of these sights. So the rear sights, very easy to remove. Now, the DXT2 night sights from XS, they do come, and at least the front sight does come a little bit large, a little bit oversized, because, and I'm not going to say these are generic, but what I am going to say is these need to fit many different sizes of dovetail. So they come a little bit large, a little bit snug. The rears, very simple. They're actually a little bit adjustable in terms of windage. They slide around, and then they end up with a couple of set screws, so very easy. But the fronts, you do need to put a little bit of effort in. So again, I leveraged my file. I was able to file this down with ease, took a number of passes, took my time, and this, all in all, did go very well. I was very careful to work both directions to get a nice even pass. And if you have any questions, you absolutely need to consult the XS website and the XS YouTube channel, which goes into a lot more detail than I am here. But you can see dry fitting from time to time, trying to get these to fit. And over time, I was able to wear everything down to the point where they fit nicely. And so take your time, go slow, don't rush, don't force anything, just take your time, and eventually you will wear these down to the point where they come really close, but you might need a dovetail file. So you can see I also did get myself a dovetail file, which allowed me to work the leading edge down just a little bit to get everything to fit nicely. Now, keep in mind, when I say the leading edge, I am going to say sort of the muzzle side of the sights. I really only worked one of the edges, and it was the muzzle end of the sights. So again, working at this real easy, taking my time, dry fitting from time to time, and finally, after a good amount of work, I was able to get everything to fit. Factory sight here, just testing it. That does go just barely in on one side and just barely in on the other side. So I feel like, I mean, that's kind of par for the course here. It does seem to fit just about the same. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit more, just a little bit, and call it good. And so this is not really a job for the faint of heart. Keep in mind the fact that you're putting your slide in a vise. You're putting your slide in a little bit of harm's way for dings or damage. So if you're somebody that's gonna basically have a safe queen, you might not like doing this job on your own. But for me, I was able to get everything to work very well eventually. I was careful with my vise. I was leveraging some pads to make sure that I didn't really ding everything up. And after I got the front sight started, I was finally able to leverage the sight puller to get everything into perfect alignment. So it took a little bit of effort, but it wasn't a big deal. Patience and going slow and taking your time definitely does work. And you can see that front sight, nice and large, nice and bright, actually went on very well, nice and snug, and absolutely fantastic. Again, the rears are not going to be very difficult. They do also come with your tool. So you'll see here a small little hex bit allowing you to tighten down on the set screws and get everything nicely into place. And as we take a look here, you can see the rear sights, the front sights, everything in reasonable alignment. Now, of course, the only way to test this is through either getting to the range or leveraging something like a bore laser. But for me, I thought it would make sense to start to Loctite everything into place. So you can see leveraging some red Loctite. So very simple, getting everything locked and into place with this thread lock, being very careful to get this only where I want it, not all over the place, but in the cracks, getting everything lined up exactly the way I felt as though I would need it, and just leveraging this to keep everything nice and in place. Because it doesn't go into all of the cracks and it's really around all the edges, you really can work with this over time if you need to move the sights again. But of course, I don't want them to move in the course of action and firing. So being very careful, cleaning everything up with a Q-tip. All in all, the installation went very well. But how's this going to shoot? Well, you're going to have to tune in for part 2.